Multiplying radicals. Let's get into it. All right, so hopefully you can see this okay. I might even zoom in just a hair here, just to make sure we're picking this up okay. So what we got to do is we got to make sure whatever happens inside the radical, we multiply those out first. Now, there will be times when I multiply them out like this, and say, okay, well the 5 stays on the outside, and this is going to be the same thing as 10 times 15 on the inside. So then I work this way and say, okay, well, it's 5 root 150. Okay, now, what's the biggest square that goes into 150? And then I keep working that way and say, oh, well, that's actually 25 times 6. Great. So then this 5 stays out here, but then what is the square root of 25? Well, that's 5. So 5 pops out, and what's the square root of 6? Well, it's the square root of 6. So then for this one, I would get 25, because 5 times 5 is 25, and then root 6. Now, it might be easier than that if we were to do something different, which means I start here with that 5, but then inside here, instead of writing 10 times 15, I break each one of these down and say, okay, well, 10 is the same thing as 5 times 2. 15 is the same thing as 5 times 3. Well, that makes it nice because 5 times 5 is 5 squared. 2 times 3 is 6. What's the square root of 5 squared? Well, 5. So there's a 5 from that one, and then this 5 comes out. 6 stays in, so that's going to be 25 root 6. It might be easier to go this way because you don't need as big of numbers. Now, anytime you multiply, you're going to get a larger number. Most of the time when you multiply, you're going to get a larger number. So just be aware of that. And if you see me do something weird, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make things easier. Okay. So that means number 2 you can definitely do on your own now. So let me scroll down. Number 3 is a weird one. All right. We have the square root of 5 times the square root of 2. Now, each of these are prime numbers, so they don't break down. So 5 times 2 goes in the inside. What's 5 times 2? It's 10. Now, what's the square root of 10? Now, it breaks down to 5 times 2. Neither one of those are squares, so we're done. You're going to have some examples like that. It's going to be okay. Those are square root problems. Now, next up here, this one, I don't know how you want to do this one. I'm just going to go ahead and multiply because I know what I'm doing. So this would be 6 times 8 inside, which is going to be 48. The biggest square that goes into 48 is not 4, 16. 16 goes into it 3 times. So then the square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 3 is just the square root of 3. So that's what you have for that one. Next up over here, that 3 is going to come down. Now, this is the square root of 6 times 6. Well, the square root of 6 times 6 is 36. And what is the square root of 36? It's 6. So then 3 times 6 is 18. We didn't have a root in this answer because everything came out clean. It was great. Great news. All right. Now, this next one, I am not going to multiply because I don't... I could do it if you wanted to talk about 72. But I know that this is 6. I know that 12 is the same thing as 6 times 2. So 6 times 6 is the same thing as... If you want to put 36 here, I'm going to put 6 squared. Okay, because it might make it look easier to me. So the square root of 6 squared is 6. The square root of 2 is just the square root of 2. So it's just 6 root 2. Now, had I multiplied, this would have been the square root of 72. Do you know what the largest square that goes into 72 is? It's 36. It's the same thing as 36 times 2. And so the square root of 36 is 6, and the square root of 2 is the square root of 2. So multiple different ways of looking at these. I'm just doing the way that's easiest for me. Now, when the roots get larger. Now, for 5 of these problems, we're talking about third roots, all right? Which means we have to think a little differently. This one especially, all right? We know that 2 to the third is 8, okay? Awesome. So that means I can go ahead and just take the third root of 8 right now. What's the third root of 8? It's 2. So if I have this, the third root of negative 2 times 2, then I have to do one or maybe 2 more things. This 2 is going to go out front. The second thing I need to think is, we're taking the odd root of a negative number, so that's actually negative 1 times 2. And what is the third root of negative 1? It's negative 1. So negative 1 pops out. The third root of this 2 is just going to stay the third root of 2. So then these 2, we can multiply those together. I get negative 2, and then I have the third root of 2. And so that's going to be the answer to that one. All right, hopefully these are getting a little nicer for you. Now, on this next one, I'm going to try and break it down again. All right, so I don't want to multiply those two and get negative 750 because that might make some of you just quit. I don't want that right now, so I have the third root. Now, 75 is the same, or negative 75 is the same thing as negative 1 times 25 times 3. All right, and then if I look over here at the 10, that's the same thing as 5 times 2. Okay, so now hopefully you see where I'm going with this. Now, that negative 1, I'm just going to keep that because we could take the third root of negative 1. It's negative 1. Now, this and this. All right, I know that 25 is the same thing as 5 squared. I know 5 is just 5 to the first. If I multiply those two together, I get 5 to the third, which is the same thing as 125. So I'm just going to write 5 to the third here because that's what you get if you take 25 times 5. Now, last but not least, I have 3 times 2, which is 6. And then I'm going to go ahead and take the cube root, which is what we call this, of those of the two things in there that we can. The third root of negative 1 is negative 1, so negative 1 pops out. The third root of 5 to the third is a positive 5. And make sure that doesn't look like a 6. Because the 6 stays inside the cube root. So there's a little 3 up there, and the 6 is inside. The last step is I make this a negative 5, not negative 1 times 5, times the third root of 6. All right. So that's how you deal with these. It's easier, in my estimation, to make them smaller than it is to make them larger. All right. Let me scroll here. Find some more fun problems. I'm going to do 11 because it'll take me probably 10 seconds. All right. 2 times 2 is 4. This will be the fourth root of 4. 4 is the same thing as 2 squared, so it's done. All right. That's it. Now, this next problem, number 12, is very, very, I'm going to call it fun, and you can laugh or whatever, but I think it is. We know that 4 to the third power is 64. We also know that 2 to the third power is 8. So, what is the third root of 64? That's just a 4 right there. What is the third root of 8? That is 2. And what is 4 times 2? Well, that's 8. Now, that's all you have to do on that one. You get a whole number 8. All right, not a bad thing there. Now, we could have multiplied those two together, or we could have done some more interesting things, but that's all that one required. Not that bad. So, then let's jump over here to number 14. We have a fourth root. Good. So, this same thing as negative 5. All right, that's going to stay on the outside. I'm going to go ahead and take these two, and I'm going to manipulate them a little bit. Now, I know 125 is the same thing as 5 to the third. I know 20 is the same thing as 5 times 4. So, I'm doing this because I have a 5 to the third and I have a 5 to the fourth. Now, inside this fourth root, 5 to the third times 5 to the first is 5 to the fourth. Now, I can work with that a little bit. All right, so this is what we have here. Negative 5 has been there since the beginning, just waiting. Now, what is the fourth root of 5 to the fourth? It's just a 5. But then I still have this fourth root, and what's inside? A 4. And you can't do anything about that. The last thing we can do is simplify what we have outside. So negative 5 times 5, that'll be negative 25 with a fourth root of 4 right next to it. All right, so that's it on that one. Scroll down a little bit. Oh, 2 more problems. Maybe I'll do both. Who knows? All right. I'm going to try and zoom in just a hair here. Change the color. So I have the third root of 32. All right. So since I'm dealing with third roots, I'm going to talk about the fact that 2 to the third power is 8. It's important to know that. It's going to work in both locations here. So this one, wait a second. Might be... 2 to the fifth power is 32, and 16 is also 2 to the fourth power. Ooh, got it. Good. So there's a trick to this one. Made it a little easier for us. That 3 is going to stay on the outside. Now, in this one, I have the third root of 32. Now, 32 is the same thing as 2 to the fifth. 16 is the same thing as 2 to the 4th. So this is what I have. 3, and then I have the third root of 2 to the 5th times 2 to the 4th. That'd be 2 to the 9th. Okay. Now, there's a trick to this, but I'm not going to tell it to you. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and take 2 to the 9th. Well, no, I'm not. What am I going to do? I'll figure it out. So that 3 is going to stay there. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of manipulation with this now. Still the third root. 2 to the 9th power is the same thing as 2 to the 3rd times 2 to the 3rd times 2 to the 3rd. Hopefully you agree with that. So that means I can take the third root of each of them separately. Now, that 3 is still out there. The third root of 2 to the 3rd is 2. The third root of this 2 to the 3rd is 2. And the third root of this 2 to the 3rd is 2. So what you really have here is 3 times 2 times 2 times 2. Well, 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 is just 24. Now that looks like a weird answer, but it's correct. And last but not least, over here, this 2 is going to stay out front. And then I have the third root of, now 10 is the same thing as 5 times 2. And 4 is the same thing as 2 squared. So, since I broke it down like that, this 2 stays on the outside. Then I have the third root of 5 times 2 to the 3rd. This 2 is still here. The third root of that 2 to the 3rd is a 2. And the third root of this 5 is just going to be the third root of 5. So then this answer here is going to be 4 third root of 5. All right. Thank you very much.